Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H virtual event space. You are tuned into the anatomy of a wedding day with Cliff Mountainer and SanDisk. And for that, I'd like to turn it over to our stand-in MC for the day, Mr. Pete Iskrig from SanDisk. How's it going?
It's going well. Hello, Derek, and hello, B&H and everybody out there. Thanks for being here. We love seeing you guys. Well, or I love knowing that you're out there. I can't actually see any of you, unfortunately. But you know, this is a fun event, and we're really happy to have Cliff here to talk to you guys about wedding photography and to get your questions answered. So before I turn it over, just real quick couple things. If you have questions, please put it into the chat of this Zoom room or the chat of whatever live stream you're watching this on. Danny's going to be feeding me those questions, and I'll be feeding them to Cliff, and we'll have a little bit of a back and forth. But we definitely want to get your questions answered, and also throw into the chat, where you guys are from. I love hearing how far around the world that these event space virtual sessions get to and where people are calling in from, especially the live session, because you always get somebody who's from Australia or Africa. And it's just really kind of amazing to think that they're A, awake at like 2 in the morning their time, but B, that the reach is that far. So let us know where you're from. And then with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Cliff, and he's going to talk to you guys about wedding photography.
Thank you, Pete. I really appreciate it. Thank you, B&H. Thank you, SanDisk. You know, I've I've been doing this for quite some time, quarter century or so, giving lectures and seminars, and my pattern has generally been show lots of pictures and tell some stories, and that's a pretty good formula. That's kind of what I'm going to do today, but I'm going to break things down a little bit. I'm going to break down the various portions of a wedding day. I'm going to share my mindset. I'm going to share the equipment that I'm using. But you guys can help me. You guys can help me with some of your questions in the chat box. I've had 953 students from 42 countries come to this studio right here in Haddonfield, New Jersey, over a 14-year period. And that was prior to COVID. And now with the virtual seminars being so prominent, I must have done 100 of these over the past 4 years, 3 years or so. And while I enjoy it just fine, it's a little bit more difficult talking to my camera. This is an empty studio, and I can't hear your comments. I can't hear your laughter. I can't hear much. So throw them into the chat. I'd love this to be a little bit more conversational, even though it can't be. But without further ado, I'm going to give you a little insight into my approach. I'll share my screen and kind of take it from there. Once again, I am a very proud Nikon ambassador for the United States, and I'm also a very proud SanDisk Extreme Pro ambassador. All of the cards and hard drives and SSDs and everything that I use truly is SanDisk. If you'd like to learn a little bit about some of the educational things that I do, or even just look at some images, that's my social, the Cliff Mountainer Photography page. You just like that. I'm pretty active on there. I have an education group where I go a little bit more in depth. That's generally for past workshop attendees, but you can give that a whirl. So here's a little bit about what's in my bag. The Z9, I just replaced my Z9 with a Z8, so I have two Z8s. I've got all this stuff in my bag, and I'll just go through this really quickly because you don't need to hear all this right now. My preferred off-camera light is my FJ200 made by Westcott, and I use a Stella Light and Motion Stella Pro CLX10, which I know B&H carries. This light is just the bomb. It is my axe. It is a piece of equipment that I use at almost every shoot. I'm using two right now to light me here in my studio. So on and so forth, lots of accessories. But, there's the Z9, and there you'll see the Z8 there in the middle, which is literally 30% smaller than the Z9. This has been a godsend for my back. It's been a godsend for my neck, all of my arthritic conditions. That's sort of the Z6 II is a little backup. But let's face it, mirrorless has changed the world of photography. I'll share this image and what's happening here. You know, yes, it's a ceremony. Yes, it's the end of a ceremony. Yes, it's outside, even though you can't really tell. But what this could have been isn't what it turned out to be. It could have been an exposure disaster. And what we're looking at right here is an area that's an open shade, and the shade is being cast by a very large mansion behind me. And behind the subjects is a body of water. It's the Delaware River. And that was probably, without exaggeration, 8 to 10 stops brighter because the sun was setting and all of that light was on the water. Now, mirrorless made this very, very, very easy, where all I had to do was look through the EVF and nail exposures. If you are a photographer today and you're using a reliable EVF, it is virtually impossible to miss your exposures. As some would say, you have to be kind of dumb to do so. I might be one of those people to say so. So it's really user-friendly. And again, I trust my Z8's EVF. So here's just some of the pieces of glass that I have in my bag. I do bring all of these to a wedding. I bring an FTZ2 for my 105-1.4, which used to be my favorite lens that I've ever used. And now it's the 85-1.2. This S-line lens for my Z cameras has been just eye-opening for me. The speed of focus, the ability to work very, very quickly and reliably at 1.2. I'm going to show you a lot of images today that I created with that particular lens. These are the cards that I use. I use the ProCinema, the CF Express cards in my camera. My Z8, I also use a SanDisk SD in the backup slot. There's my reader. This is how I transfer my files around. When I back my files up when I'm doing a traveling shoot, I go back and forth to my studio, to my home, so I have everything mirrored in both places. And this is the drive that I prefer to do so. I also love this little drive. It might even be a little bit more durable. And these are my backup systems. I have a ton of these G drives, and there you go. That's just a little bit about some of the workflow. The first thing I do when I walk through the door on a wedding day, I'm asked for the details. I'm going to ask for sentimental details. And yes, of course, I'm going to use a macro lens. I use the 105 S lens for my macro work. And I'm not one to sit there spending, 30 minutes on shoes or rings, or I think I'd much rather be capturing moments. And while there's some photographers out there that we all know that do amazing details, and I'm not poo-pooing the details, but I'd much rather be capturing moments between those people there than sitting there, futzing around with details for 15 or 20 or more minutes. But I do them. I think I do them pretty well, and I light them pretty well. But again, it's really down and dirty, very, very quick stuff. But then I'll find out what's really important to the bride for details. Notice you didn't see any shoes in there, although I did shoot shoes a couple months ago where the grandmother took the bride shoe shopping. So I shot the shoes. So that was important to her. So this envelope was signed by every bride in this family since 1887. And those handkerchiefs, that handkerchief was walked down the aisle by every bride in that family since 1887. That's a detail. That's an important facet of the day. That story needs to be told. So, and then I move on with some wedding preparation. And, when I took this picture this is a Rembrandt, and I have studied this work. There's not a whole lot of Rembrandts at the Barnes Foundation, but when I do look at his work, I am absolutely floored. And it really is all about, for me, the relationships between shadows and highlights. Notice the use of shadows and highlights here. Notice how your eye goes right where he wants it to go with the use of those highlights. And that's really what I try to do. I try to use shadow as my canvas and light as my paint. And when I'm working in a wedding prep area, oftentimes I'm going to bring down curtains. I'm going to turn off overhead lights. I'll turn off lamps. And I'm trying to get one singular light source at times so that I'm getting directional light and placing that light exactly where I want it. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that that highlight is juxtaposed against a darker area so that my eye goes right to it, not unlike this little girl. Now, is this photograph staged? Well, yes and no. This moment was unfolding, but I did have a hand in this. I'm not a photojournalist anymore, although I was for the Philadelphia Inquirer for 15 years. But I did say, you know what? Can you give your aunt that letter right here, sweetheart? And I backed away and I put her right in the right spot. And that's sort of what I like to do. So the juxtaposition of shadows and highlights. The other thing I'm going to do is set the stage for moments to take place, but I'm not going to stage the moments. When I'm doing these prep shots, oftentimes they might not be doing these various things in a spot that's conducive to good light or good composition. So instead, what I might do is say, how about you do this right here? And Kate asked me, she said, Cliff, would you like me to read this letter from Stephen? And I said, absolutely. She said, where would you like me to do it? And I said, how about right here in this great light? But what I didn't do, I did not place those bridesmaids looking on, with these wonderful, warm looks of interest into what Kate was reading. I didn't do that. And I didn't tell Kate to cry. So, this is their moment. It's not mine. And then moving forward, putting people in this light, putting people in spots where the light is going to be effective for me. And that's really what I'm out to do. Sometimes I don't have shadow to juxtapose my light against. So instead, what I'll do, I'll just blow the background out, but I'm still going to do my best to expose the subject as properly as possible. Here's another one where the mother of the bride wanted me to include the bridesmaids, the junior bridesmaids. So I just put them in there. I said, hold the dress. And there's no crime in that. Is this real? No, absolutely, positively not. This is not a real photojournalistic image. I can't submit this to the wedding photojournalism competition for the Icon Awards, which used to be the WPPI Awards of Excellence, which I just judged a couple of days ago. Again, putting people in good light and good compositional scenarios. This is sort of the quintessential holy grail for me with respect to what I'm seeing on Mom's face, that lovely rim light coming from that tunnel of light from that window. I love that kind of light. I wish I could use it all the time because it really defines my signature style, if you will. Not a signature style, but my preferred style. Sometimes I like to play photographic voyeur and exit a room and sort of shoot through a doorway, like in this particular moment. And then sometimes I like to get fairly close. And, I think it was Robert Capa who said, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. Here I am with a 24 and real close and making sure that the light's falling on his son's face while he dresses his dad for his wedding. So, and then I'm going to move on perhaps to some individual portraits. And these are really devised, and my goal is to make them as dramatic as possible with the direction of light. And direction creates dimension. Okay, not more light, not blasting light, not turning on all the lights, but determining where you want that direction to come from. And oftentimes that could just be a singular light source like this window, all right, or the window to my left. When I shoot these types of images, I do my best not to have that light directly behind me so that I'm actually getting a little bit of shadow to give me some dimension. So on the right side of her face, there's a little bit of shadow, that little splash of light, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Same kind of thing there. Obviously, the light's coming from sort of over my left shoulder. That's where the window is. And then we have this Rembrandt, Portrait of a Young Woman. And we've all, whoever is watching this, most likely you've heard of Rembrandt lighting. Well, this is really the true meaning of Rembrandt lighting, because this is where it comes from. That triangle of light, that signature little triangle. Notice when Rembrandt took this picture, he didn't blast any light on the right side. Yes, no, I'm totally joking. Here we are, that little triangle coming from the other side. My phone's ringing. I'm just ignoring it here. Sorry about that, if you hear that. Once again, this is one of my favorite brides. This is Shobha Narayan, a wonderful Broadway actress. Just that little bit of dimension, just have her looking off towards the window. I mean, you know, this was my 105-1.4. I wish I had the 1.2 to completely eliminate the background, but still, you get the idea of what I'm trying to do. The direction creates dimension. One of my photographic heroes, Jay Maisel, the drama of light exists not only in what is lit, but also what is left dark. If the light is everywhere, the drama is gone. When you look at an image like this, it brings to mind something that my friend Dave Black said as well, where he said, if you want to make a photograph look interesting, light only part of it. And so just a few little portions of light on his face, his hand, highlights on the jacket, highlights on the tie. This is, you know, the highlights are what make this image. But what makes the highlights that make this image is the direction from where the light is coming from. The other thing I'll do is I like to ask my clients questions. As an inquisitive former photojournalist, I want to find out what's important to them. I want to find out their stories. This is an absolutely wonderful man. His name is Sam, and he was just commissioned as an officer. And these items, which I'm going to be very honest, I don't know what he's holding, but they're certainly important to him. I didn't go into that great a detail to find out more about that, but he said he would like a picture with these things. He was just commissioned, and I just put him by the window and made that. This is the bride's parents' home. That's their living room. It is an incredibly traditional home. And they wanted a picture there, and they wanted something timeless, they said. Well, I thought this is pretty timeless. This is very traditional. It's if this was if this was like a bad sepia with kind of cracked stuff going through it, you might think it's 100 years old. But this was just taken a couple of years ago. This man's son was named after his father, and his son was just a couple of months old. And he was telling me about how his father couldn't be at this wedding, and that they named their son after him. And I saw this picture on his shelf, and I said, "Is this your dad?" And he agreed, and he was very emotional when I took this picture. And this is one of his favorite photos throughout the day. I don't have to say anything about this. Yes, that's her mom who couldn't be there. So ask questions. Again, this is just some light coming from a window. She's reading the letter from her husband that day, her fiance, who she's about to marry. That happens a lot in weddings. So you wedding photographers, you know that these images are going to take place. So find some good light. Find a good spot. I chose a very, very neutral, almost completely blank background, which it is. I brought the subject away from it. I used a very shallow depth of field and did it that way. This was a wedding at a synagogue, and this was a Holocaust memorial, and these are Holocaust survivors. I don't have to say a whole lot more. This was one of my favorite pictures that I made that year, and I think it tells a pretty good story. And the contrast in personalities, they just make me smile each and every single time. So the first look, I'm torn whether I like these or not anymore. I started doing them, and I believe that I kind of started this trend back in 1999 with a client named Allison, and she couldn't see her groom, couldn't take any portraits of them in the light because they got married about this time of year. It was right after daylight savings at 5 p.m. So you couldn't go outside with any light. So she brought the idea up to me. What if I saw him beforehand? This is in 1999, so that's 24 years ago. I said, I think that's a wonderful idea. How would you like to go about that? She said, well, just don't tell my dad. And I said, of course, I'm not going to tell your dad. And I had them, I brought the bride to a spot. He came up behind her. They saw each other in this beautiful location that I chose. And that's the iteration that I follow. This lovely bride, this is 3 weeks ago. She is holding her vows. And very close to her heart. And this was, again, this is my 8514. I'm sorry, my 8512, that beautiful bokeh. Who cares about that? It's a lovely moment. And here they are. Now, this is my 70 to 200 now, having him come and see her for the first time. This was a fun first look where this is my buddy Luca, who I photographed last month. And he, I'm sorry, Luca, you can't play, buddy. You know you can't play. But it was a romantic gesture. It was a wonderful gesture where he wanted to play her a song from the doorway, from the hallway where she could not see him. And they did not see each other in this moment. And just the reaction was kind of precious. And as he was fumbling his way through some really bad notes, everyone was just smiling. It was really, really nice. And then, Luca from behind, this whole series of images or first looks here, and I'll kind of give you a sense of really the way I like to do them, putting them in good light and then letting it happen. A few years ago, I guess it was 2005, I guess it was, I was at WPPI and I was doing a seminar there, and I realized that I really embraced this harsh light, this, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I noticed that a lot of people were preferring to shoot in, an open shade or conditions that didn't exactly embrace this harsh light. So I shared some ways in which to do it. And I came up with these, which is really, it's quite basic, actually, when you think about it. Shade is not the answer. And I really don't like shade because there's no texture. Put your subject between you and the sun. If you have to do a first look at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you can still do it. You don't have to hide from the sun. I expose for faces, not veils, because your face will be underexposed. And I don't care that the veil gets a little bit blown out. It's not for a competition. So I try to make this bad light good light. That's bad light. That is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And all I have to do is turn them around. So I put my subject between me and the sun, and it's really easy. No, there's no fill flash. No, there's no Stella. I'll talk about that in a minute, how I'm using my continuous light source, my CLX10. I love that light, but this is when I didn't have it. Would I have used it here? Probably, because I could have gotten some catch lights. But when I'm running and gunning, I just put the light in the direction that I want it and work with the clients from there. There's no additional light going on here. It's lights coming directly behind them.
Cliff, can I jump in real quick with a question we had?
Please. Hope you can. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you handle balancing light and not using light. You talked about the run and gun. Are there times when do the light sources get in the way, or how do you handle that, or how do you decide whether you're going to use light or work with what you have? Because you talked about the image right there. It's a beautiful image. It's something that just as easily could have been done with a light.
Yeah. You know what? I think
that decision.
I'm going to answer that with a photo, and Perfect. I'm going to throw this photograph in here and tell you that there is no additional light here. And when I feel as though using my Stella or using my Westcott would be advantageous, or if I need to add dimension to a photograph, or if I need to add fill to what can be improved, can make a photograph better, I'm going to answer that question as I go along, and I'm going to keep that question in mind as I'm moving forward with the presentation, because I think it's a great question. And in an image like this is just an archway in Philadelphia, and that's completely natural light with no additional reflector or additional light source. So I think an additional light source coming from the front would destroy this image, because it would lose that dimension. So I'm not looking to flatten out the dimension with additional light. What I'm looking to do is, if I need to use some fill, like here, this is a little bit of my CLX10 filling in. This is part of the Z9 campaign. This was my 10514, and the evenness of the light is what I was looking for here. So I wanted to get a little bit of fill, and I also needed some catch lights in her eyes. And if I did not use that CLX10 here, it would be flat completely. There'd be no catch lights whatsoever. So I don't like dead eyes either. So it's really a feel, and this is a great example and a great way to answer that question. And thank you for the question. When I'm shooting something like this, and I'm going to talk about people with varying skin colors in a few minutes, but this image here, it looks very, very natural, but in actuality, this is not all natural light. The only natural light is coming from the upper left, okay, hitting her face. To the right side of the frame, to camera right and behind, my assistant is hitting Siva on the left, the gentleman on the left, the groom, hitting him in his upper area, his face and his upper torso, with a CLX10, probably at full blast at 10,000, to match the intensity of the light coming from the sun. So to answer your question with this photo, I wanted to have a balanced photograph with balanced light. And because I didn't have another sun, I emulated that sun coming from camera right with my off-camera continuous light. Does that help a little bit?
Definitely. Thank you for that.
And so you can't tell that this is off-camera light because it looks pretty natural, but it is. And here's an image where I'm mixing, and again, thank you for prompting that question. I'm mixing a little bit of backlight, getting some deliberate flare. And by the way, my S glass, it's not the easiest stuff in the world to flare. So I'm literally trying to move my body around and dance with that light a little bit, just to add that little bit of flare, just to get that, you know, a little bit more of a dramatic feel. I don't want to say dramatic flare, a little more of a dramatic feel to this. And then my assistant is filling her face in camera left with the CLX10. Now the CLX10 also has a Fresnel on it. So it's a 50-degree dispersion. So there's an angle reducer, and it also focuses the light. So notice it's not hitting her left hand. It's only hitting her upper torso. So, and that's another thing that I like. It's a sort of a gradated dispersion that doesn't just blast away. Once again, just using a little backlight and a little CLX10. This is 100% natural light for this portrait, just putting that light behind them and having them do their thing. By the way, this wedding, this is all just 2 weeks ago, so no one's ever seen these images here. When, you know, I'm going to talk about environmental portraits in just a moment, but one of the things, and I won't have to repeat it, when I'm doing environmental portraits, and this couple wanted to see, this is Belmont Plateau, which Will Smith sings about in Summertime. It's the best overall view of Philadelphia skyline from Philadelphia. And you can see it from the Jersey side, but from this side, this is a wonderful view of the city. It's even better at night. But I'm just using the sun upper left so that it's coming from camera right. I'm sorry, upper right, camera right, hitting her kind of harsh. But what that's allowing me to do, that's allowing me to, when I expose for her properly, and I'm probably at somewhere around, I'd say a 16,000th of a second. That's probably, at like ISO 250. That's bringing the sky down too. So the sky's not completely white. So using the directional light, putting that highlight on her face up against those darker trees, and then I'm compressing the image with a nice long lens to create this environmental portrait. This is just last weekend using the lines coming from the steps. And once again, I'm pulling her away from these steps using a mid-range telephoto, which is my 85, and getting this really pretty, these steps with all this fall foliage, all the leaves are down on it. And yes, getting back to your other question, I am using a little bit of fill light with the continuous CLX10. The thing I like about the CLX10 is, as opposed to a flash, it is really, really quick, and I can see everything with my EVF really fast, and I'm running and gunning, and I'm moving very, very quickly. So there's Miggy. This is Asta and Miggy, who I just photographed last weekend, and got to get Miggy in a few of these. And again, this is just the sun now. No additional light. I guess to the long answer to the question, because I know I've answered this a few times, I just see what looks good, and I use that whatever light source I feel makes the photograph the most flattering. Again, no extra light here. She's just basking in the sunshine and that warm sunshine. And once again, I was really stunned when I saw this. This is 1/32,000th of a second at f1.2 at ISO 250. I mean, it was really bright out there, and I wanted to go as shallow as possible. But I also wanted that sky blue, and you're not going to get it if you overexpose it. Oh, you know what? I had to, oh, I know what I just did. Okay. I went up instead of sideways. CLX10, a little bit of shallow depth of field. This is, I think this was the 780 campaign, and this lovely bride helped me do this campaign. Just a little bit of Stella to the camera right. And this is all natural. This is under City Hall in Philadelphia, just that one little sliver. And again, the direction creates everything here. I don't want any light coming from camera left, filling that shadow in. And I'm just very careful in not overexposing that highlight on his face. And a little bit more of these. There is no fill light there. I just like the veil kind of blown out there. And then one of the questions people ask me all the time in my workshops, how do you expose for darker complected people? And I go around the room and I ask people, well, let's say you have a dark person and a light person, what would you do? And invariably I'm going to hear the answer, I would open up a little bit, and I'm like, well, if you open up, won't that make everything brighter? And then they just kind of scratch their head. The answer to the question is, how do you expose for these people? It's properly. Highlights are what give darker complected people the dimension. Shadow is what give lighter complected people their dimension. And I'm not going to overexpose my friend Mario here because he's in a dark-ish setting. I want this light to be perfect on his face. Here's Max and his bride using these highlights to light them. really I'm just exposing for my highlights. In this situation, this is Liz and Nicole. I'm just putting Nicole in the direction, pardon me, where the light can really hit her and give her highlights. If I had switched them around, the light would not hit Nicole, and I would have either had to use some light to light her, or my decision was to leave it this way. And I think this looks a lot better than having to go and use another light. Again, just that little sliver of light on Nicole's face is, I kind of like that here. Once again, just putting them in a situation for me to succeed here, where the light is coming from my upper left and behind them. And because that light is upper left, it's hitting Asta's face and giving me that little rim of light on her face. Miggy is light in complexion, so I didn't need any other light than the sun in this situation. And once again, I'm just using the light in direction to give me that highlight on the front of Asta's face. So there you have it. And here's another frame here where there was not enough light on Miggy's face. So my assistant Drew is using Stella to give me that highlight on his face. And I'm just using the sun to light Asta's face. So there you have it. Environmental portraits. We just saw this a little while ago. This is another shoot that I did. And this was with the 100 to 400. And I tried to get back pretty far there. We are quite a distance from the city of Philadelphia here on the Belmont Plateau. But because I'm using such a long lens and compressing the scene, the city looks like it's right behind them. That's what I prefer to do with an environmental portrait. Okay. I'm not on top of this girl with a 24 to 70. I'm all the way back in another room with a 70 to 200, probably racked out at about 180 as far back as I can go, so I can compress this and put the buildings behind her. Similar scenario, same kind of thing. And we saw that one earlier. I wanted to point out again what I'm doing here, which is compressing the scene and using the separation from the highlight and the trees behind her. So it's almost 3 or 4 dimensional, where you have the city, you have the trees, you have them, and you have the grass below. So it's a couple of different color combinations as well. Environment. This is in Helsinki, Finland. It's a government building. Just using the environment to create the image. This is sort of a thumbing my nose up at all of you NFL fans, because these are amazing Eagle fans that I photographed a couple weeks ago. And the Eagles are sitting at 8-1 right now. So, I'm sure I'm going to get some hate mail or some hate comments, but the heck with y'all. Go Eagles. This is, again, using the environment. This is an art museum in Philadelphia. It's the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. And again, just a little bit of Stella, camera left, controlling and isolating with that light so that it's not splashing all over the place. Environmental portraits. This is the Merchant Exchange building. So I love these environments that I'm able to use in my wonderful city. Again, my favorite place to shoot in the world, if I had to shoot in one place, it would be right here in Philadelphia under City Hall. And this is, one more time, Stella CLX-10 lighting his face, natural light coming from the archway, lighting her face. This isn't magic. This isn't Photoshop. This is just 2 light sources. And I'm trying to equalize the quantity of light for exposure purposes with the Stella CLX-10.
Cliff, I wanted to jump back in before we dive into this section and go back to the gear for a second. And
sure,
what's your go-to lens? A lot of beautiful images here. And I know you told us a little bit about what you use, but what is your one, if you had to really knock out in a dynamic portrait, what are you going to?
So let me see here. Let me go down to, I'm going to go down, you know what, right here. So this is my 85-1.2 now. I used to really, really rely on a 70-200, and I like to rack it out at 200. In fact, anybody who's ever taken my workshop, if they were shooting something, let's say they were shooting this scenario, and they were shooting this picture, and I would see that they weren't at 200, I would go and I would reach over them and I would rack it to 200, and they would look at me like I was some kind of jerk. But I would ask them a very simple question. Why are you shooting this at 100 millimeters when you can shoot it at 200 millimeters? Compress the scene. And why not shoot this at wide open? Why not shoot it at 2.8? Now, or actually before the 85-1.2, I loved my 105-1.4. I like the blurred background. I like simplicity. I like isolation. So simplicity, isolation, compression, blurred backgrounds. Those are the reasons that I choose the lenses that I do. If I'm telling a story and I'm documenting something, I would have to say my 35 is probably my favorite. But when I'm shooting portraiture right now, because of the 85-1.2, I have, that just went out. Okay. Because of the 85-1.2, I have gone from 70-200 or 200 to 105 to the 85-1.2. So I basically have gone from 2.8, 1.4 to 1.2. And you're not going to get this bokeh at 2.8. It's just not possible. So now my favorite portrait lens is my 85-1.2. I hope that helps. I'm going to actually see if I can plug this back in. That's fine. There we go. Sorry about that. My charger.
No worries. No, and I think it's beautiful how you command that really shallow depth of field. It's so easy to have a boring picture when you have such little background, but the way you work in the colors, the framing, you really pay attention to what's out of focus.
Well, thank you for saying so. And I can answer that question, or I'm going to pretend that's a question. I'm going to tell you, it's about, and this is another workshop point, seeing three-dimensionally. Foreground, subject, background. Now we have no foreground here. Subject, background. There's a relationship with the subject and the background. And so what I basically do, I do a little bit of a dance with my composition, if you will. Okay. Dancing with it. Let's take this image where, and this is the 105, by the way. I'm not going to have something sticking out of the back of her head like a tree or a telephone pole. Or let's say that I raise the camera and I would have the water line sticking through her neck. So I won't do those types of things. So it's about looking through your viewfinder and seeing the different dimensions that you're encountering, and then positioning from there. If I'm taking this image, and this is really, I'm talking about simplicity here, and I think my quote was not a quote, but why look past the simple if simple actually works? So I'm deliberately taking and framing this image in a way that juxtaposes the highlights against that dark background. If those highlights on her face were juxtaposed against the lighter grass, which is about a foot or two below her face, you can't see the highlights. So A, it's about composition. B, it's about light. And C, it's about taking the highlights and juxtaposing them against shadow. And all of those things are creating texture, dimension, and mood. So, this is, now I'm squatting down a little bit so that I can, I'm seeing three-dimensionally. I've got a foreground, I've got a subject, I've got a background. So it's really those things that compel me to create composition in that way. And it's, I'm not going to take this picture with a 24-70. I think also, to answer your question, it all starts with your lens selection and being able to isolate your subject, with the way you're seeing and the way you're composing and with focal length. I can't make this picture with a 24-70. I couldn't make the first frame that I showed you, this one up here. I can't make that with a 24-70. That's just absolutely impossible to do. So those are the reasons that I'm doing what I'm doing. And for a lot of these images, I'm going to show you this. And again, you can get this at B&H. This is the CLX10. And it's just a very simple little light. Comes with, you can get a tungsten head for it, or you can use some gels. And then it's just that simplicity that allows me to, do what I'm doing. These are all lit with the Stella. This is Asta last weekend, just a little kicker on her face. This is the 8512 as well. So it just, the light just allows me to do things that I just can't do with a speed light. And if you want to see the difference, this is, with and without. Here's the tungsten head that I can just create a dramatic blue sky at dusk. And then sometimes I can literally emulate sunshine. I'm putting this behind them on a very flat, overcast day, and it makes it look like the sun is shining. Going into a little bit of family portraits now. I'll go through these kind of quick here. This is really not good. This is looks like it's sort of exposed properly, but I use some type of light on every single one of my family portraits. I would say 95 to 99% of the time. So I will use my Westcott 200, the FJ 200 for most of these. And I'm just getting an exposure value, underexposing a little bit, and then filling in with the FJ. In this particular case, these are my pro photos. I'm blasting 1,000 watt seconds on them here. So sometimes you need big flash, sometimes you can do it with smaller flash. But I can take that FJ, put it on the end of a monopod, and it really is very, very portable. So I'll look for some open shade. So what have we done? We've done some details. We've done some wedding prep. We've done some individual portraits. We've done a first look. We've done some bridal portraits. And now it's time for the family formals. And this is how I approach that. I look for bright, simple, neutral backgrounds. I like the separation. I use long lenses. I'm not shooting these with 24-70s unless there's a giant group and I can't go back. I adjust angles to concentrate on composition, which I'll show you in a minute. I use manual camera mode almost exclusively anyway now with my mirrorless cameras, and I underexpose by 1 or 2 stops. Now, this is just a couple weeks ago. This is up in northern New Jersey at Mountain Creek Resort. We're at a nice high elevation in Vernon, New Jersey. And what have I done here? I've basically, if I didn't use my FJ to fill in their faces, what you'd see here is a situation that was basically about 2 stops underexposed. Now, with mirrorless cameras, this is so easy to do now to kind of underexpose a scene. It is so incredibly simple because you can see that in areas, everything's kind of underexposed, but I wanted to get this background really saturated and just really pretty. If I just took the picture and exposed for these people properly, everything in the background would just be blown out. So I need some light to do so. So I'm filling in with my FJ. So underexpose about 2 stops, expose properly with the flash, and that's how you get these types of images. And, dark complected people, if you don't light them, they're going to just not look great. So you want to bring out the colors in these. These folks were from Mali. And just beautiful people, beautiful colors. And I wouldn't think of just using available light on these. We needed to see a little bit of flash, needed some flash. Sometimes you don't need flash. So what determines whether or not I use it or not? Well, what looks good? Sometimes it's deliberate. This is guys in a bridal party. And then sometimes I'll show this image. If I can't see it here, but I believe I shot this This is talk about balancing light. I shot this at I think it was 1/6 or 1/8 of a second, might even say 1/10 of a second. But when you are really in dark situations, you want to get a little bit of ambient light, just drag that shutter. Ceremonies.
Cliff, if I could jump back in. We had another question come in from Renato joining us on Vimeo asking, what modifiers, if any, do you use?
Well, the only modifier I use on my CLX10 is what's called a Fresnel, and it's a little 50-degree cap that goes on it. In fact, let's see here. Do I have one? Yes, I think I do. Where is it? Where is that puppy? Here. I'll stop the share just for a second if I can, or no, I can't. Well, I can't stop the share, but if you can see me here.
Yeah, yep, we can.
This puppy right here fits on the top of my continuous light. For my FJ, I use grids to reduce the angles. It's a great question. So I almost always use the grid, and then the grid sits on a reflector. So with those family portraits that were right here, for example, there was no grid because I needed a larger dispersion, but the reflector did a very nice job in dispersing the light to that wider angle. And by the way, I still shot this with a 70-200, probably at around 80 or 90 millimeters. I am quite a distance away using a remote flash.
Cliff, we can't see the shared screen. Just try initiating the shared screen again and see if it pops back up for us.
Go here? Zoom. Share. Oh, there we go. Perfect. There it is. Sorry about that.
No problem.
All right. And so there's that frame I was referring to. And I'll just kind of go through those one more time. And then I'm going to get to some ceremonies. So one of the other questions I'm asked about a lot is, what about recessionals and processionals? How are you shooting these? How are you focusing with these? And the method that I used to use, it was kind of crude. It was focus, recompose, focus, recompose, focus, recompose, focus, recompose. So it's really a focus, recompose, click sequence. Now with my Z8, I'm in 3D tracking. I'm shooting. This is, by the way, this is the 35-1.8 at 1.8. And I walk onto the face and I just go click, 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 click. Every single one of these is in focus. No problem. This is my 85. No problem. So this has changed everything in terms of ceremonies. This is immediately following the ceremony. This is just last weekend. This is the 85-1.2. And you can see the metadata on the right. It's just so simple with 3D tracking in the Z8. And, my approach to ceremonies, I'm a photojournalist. There's no secret. There's no secret sauce. I'm just, using my EVF, exposing properly. I never use a flash during a ceremony. Let me repeat that. I never use a flash during a ceremony because I just don't need one. There's no need for a flash during a ceremony. Ever, 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 ever. And so those are ceremonies. Really simple. This one here. This one's 20 years old. The others are very recent. This is 2 weeks ago during a Hindu ceremony where they're searching for the ring in that thing. It's the wonderful people. I'm using my 24-70 here. So I'm bringing a ton of lenses. This is my 24-70. I believe, it's my 24-70 here. I bring 8 lenses with me and I use them all. So receptions, I'm going to do some room shots. I use various lenses for this. This, I believe, is the 14, 85, just doing some details. This is last weekend's wedding, so I just figured I'd show some of these. And then some basics of flash at receptions. Yes, I'm using a grid on my FJ almost all the time so that I'm isolating where the light needs to go. I like to go available if I can, but if the light's good, I'll use it. My assistant is my voice activated light stand, and I'm just looking to create texture. I use manual flash. I go about 2 stops under, and I use my flash to be my primary light. Blessings and toasts are really wonderful. With off-camera light, you can really get that texture and really concentrate on reactions. This is a crowning ceremony at a Jewish wedding. Here's one literally from last weekend. Just the sisters of the bride, lights coming from my assistant holding the light camera right. And this, I believe you guys used one of these for your promotion. This is the FJ200. This is back from the Z9 campaign. Again, just isolating small little cone of light hitting the subject. And this is last weekend as well. Just 8512. This is literally during just a moment that I probably shot 50 frames here, just capturing them, just sharing a moment privately during dinner. And this is, it's real. Available light, being able to use this 8512 in a way that, sometimes I don't need a flash. And I think a flash here might have, I don't want to say destroyed this moment, but I think this gives it an even better feel, a little motion with, with Samantha's hands clapping. I think it's pretty darn cool. And again, just only candlelight here. So sometimes using flash, sometimes I don't. And then sometimes I'm going to give them some money shots, these things that they can end the book with. Just yes, no, this is not a photoshopped rainbow. This I had to get in a hurry. They're like, oh, there's a rainbow. And again, you just underexpose that sky a little bit and fill in with the FJ. And then this is in Liberty State Park. This is at the Liberty House restaurant. Shoot a lot of weddings there and that's Manhattan behind them. And of course, I'm using a long lens to compress. Same kind of situation there. That's a flash behind them. That's in Manhattan, a little bit of a FJ and a grid matching and balancing the light. So all of these are just images that I try to kind of give them an ending with. Okay. And then here's one here that's I don't even know. This is like several, I can't see it here because it's blocking, but several second exposure. And then what I wanted to talk about a little bit was my workflow after I download and back up everything. I'm using something called Aftershoot right now. If you want to do a screen grab, you can get a discount on it with this. I'm not here to kind of sell this stuff, but I just wanted to show what I'm doing to save time now in my workflow. This is really as much a part of shooting a wedding as shooting the wedding. This Aftershoot is able to in about 10 minutes process 800 or 900 images at my wedding after I call. It's just remarkable. Those are the befores and after. Before and after. Pretty darn cool. So, and then lastly, I want to get to moments. And I'm going to go through this rather quickly. The whole point of taking pictures so you don't have to explain things with words. And sometimes words just aren't necessary. And as a photojournalist, I go into these weddings and realize the most important facet of these weddings are the moments between families and their loved ones. And, some of these things have just blown my mind and I shake after I take them. And that's how important these have become to some of these people. What use is having great depth of field if there's no adequate depth of feeling? That's a real first look. During a tish at a Jewish wedding. The best images are the ones that retain their strength and impact over the years, regardless of the number of times they were viewed. And no matter how many times I look at this image, I feel the impact. This bride had seen that last one and really wanted to do that with her grandmother. Reading their letters that they wrote to one another, seeing his bride for the first time on the wedding day walking down the aisle. The picture is good or not from the moment it was caught in the camera. No Photoshop is going to help this image. It's just good the way it is. And then there's images that stand the test of time. And for me, I only like a few images that I shoot per year. Really, I know that sounds silly, but it's the truth. And Adams once said 12 significant photographs in any one year is a good crop. Well, I think it's a great crop because it's, I don't really think I make 12 great images a year. This is from 2004. It's one of my favorites. Still today. 20 years ago. For me, the subject is always more important than the picture. And this one here sits in my studio. They were married for 69 years. So these images have been around a while and still mean something to me. The horse had an allergy, for real. She wanted to walk down the stairs and have Dad see her for the first time in a very traditional way. And I end every seminar with this because if you look at it long enough, you'll see an old lady. And yeah, it kind of speaks for itself. But what I want to do, I'm trying to stop the share here. I don't know how. There we go. So I want to answer any questions that you guys might have. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Pete, are there questions out there that I can help you with?
I don't see any questions on my end, Derek, unless there were others that came in the live stream. I don't have visibility to that.
I'm going to throw one out, and maybe this is less a question, more just a brief topic of discussion. Your work, such feeling is exuded by your work, Cliff. Is that from, or has part of that been because of your past with photojournalism? I mean, you have an eye for a moment, and I feel like, without digressing too deeply, our industry has become so heavily weighted towards gear, and we need 50 lights, and it's almost like a Hollywood set now on everything from a wedding shoot to a portrait shoot. I feel like you're just there, a guy with a camera that has a great eye for a moment, and you feel the images. Fair assessment?
I don't really have a comment on that. You're very
I would agree with your assessment, Derek.
You're very kind. So I'm gonna say this without fear of backlash. But you asked me a question. I'm going to be really honest. I think mirrorless cameras have made me better. I think mirrorless cameras have allowed everyone to enter this world of photography when maybe some of them shouldn't have. And I think there is a lack of understanding, a lack of empathy, a lack of understanding on what's important on a wedding day or photography in general. Just because you can see an exposure and just because you can get a photograph in focus doesn't mean it's a good picture. I see far too many photographers using the mirrorless cameras in a way that, you know, they're completely blowing out backgrounds. They'll put a subject in front of a window and they'll blow the background out to smithereens because they can see that the exposure on the face is proper. They take the picture, they'll call it light and airy, when there's photographers that have been doing a light and airy feel that are phenomenal at it. I can, Jose Villa and Elizabeth Messina have been doing it for decades, and they are spectacularly talented people. That doesn't mean that everyone should emulate that. And that doesn't mean that just because you have a mirrorless camera in your hand, you should blow out every background. I think the anticipation and the reaction that I learned through photojournalism helped me immensely in having empathy and telling stories with weddings. But I think being able to of having the privilege of shooting so many weddings, I learned how to use light because weddings demanded it. Wedding photography is a really difficult genre. It brings together so many different facets of photography: portraitist, photojournalist, all of these different realms. I don't want to sit there and light the daylights out of a photograph. I'd much rather use simple lighting. One light for me is enough for the entire day. I don't really have an answer to your question. I think it was more rhetorical, but I think people need to understand that just because you have a mirrorless camera doesn't make you a photographer. If you own a Nikon, it makes you a Nikon owner. It doesn't make you a photographer right now. So there's more work to be done. And I think a better understanding of light, the relationship between shadows and highlights, understanding what lens compression can do for a scenario, and not every wedding needs to be shot entirely with a 24-70. I think those are things, the skill sets I think are lacking in some areas and in some worlds. And then I also think that there's some photographers out there right now who are just really damn good. And their learning curve was really developed quickly with these mirrorless cameras, and they're doing a hell of a good job. So I'm not pointing fingers at any photographer, because I think these things have made a lot of people very, very good. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. There's a lot of really good photographers out there.
Yeah, that's such an astute take. I mean, you're always going to have the people where, like you said, you think you put it perfectly. There's a quicker learning curve. They're just going to get it. Some people are naturally, and some people, some people have to work their way around, and it is what it is. I think experience, you can't account for experience. There's nothing that's going to give you experience except for experience and going out there and doing the work.
Well, what these things, for example, what my Z8 has done right now with the 3D tracking and the 3D tracking, it blows my mind, because I put the cursor where I want it, and it doesn't move. And it doesn't matter whether I'm at f/22 or 1.2. It doesn't move. It's in focus every single time I push the shutter. That's remarkable. But it doesn't make it a picture for me unless my light and my composition and the moment is there. And so those are the things that combine to make a good picture. It's not how is it exposed? Is it in focus? Texture, dimension, and mood for me are key. And then I like to say this, and this is not, this is not BS. I'm only as good as my clients, because if they're not handing me these moments with their feelings, I'm just pushing buttons.
Yeah. Can we sneak one more in? We had a question come in from YouTube.
I love answering good questions.
Awesome. Greaser Central on YouTube asking, hi, I just started working on photography. Do you retouch the photos, or the colors are naturally from the camera? What's your post-processing like, Cliff?
Well, my post-processing, I explained a little while ago. The beautiful thing about this, it's a company called Aftershoot. It's not my company. Okay. We used to process everything in Lightroom individually. I had a studio manager doing all this stuff for me for years and years and years. And what you do very quickly, I uploaded 30,000 images to Aftershoot. It learned and chewed through its AI. It learned everything. And now I simply cull my work down. Aftershoot calls, but I don't let Aftershoot call. I call. I push a button, and it uses my own profile, and all of my images are processed through artificial intelligence, and then I just tweak them just a little bit afterwards. I use my auto white balance in my Z8, and that gets things very, very close. And then it's just some tweaks afterwards. Retouching, if there's some minor facial retouching, if it's a close portrait. Otherwise, you barely saw any retouching in any image I showed today. And also, no cropping. I don't crop my images. I crop with my eyes and my camera.
Interesting. And if anybody has any more questions on the after shoot stuff, we actually had Justin Benson from After Shoot on recently to talk about after shoot edits. But yeah, you guys can always check that out on
and
our
I did have
I
had a frame there. You know what? I can't find it right now. Oh, you know what? Here, I'll put it in the chat.
Perfect.
That's a code. That's my code.
Awesome.
Yes. I got to be very clear. There is like a small kickback. Yes. But there's a discount code and you can't get that deal without a founder right now. So blah, blah, blah. The long and the short of it is you're only as good as your clients. Learn about light, skill sets before action sets. I love that one. And I want to give a huge thanks to B&H and SanDisk. I love doing this with you guys, and your questions were great. So thank you.
We love having you.
Yes, I'll second that. We love Pete always brings. I know when Pete brings guests to the table, they're always good. They don't need to be vetted. And Cliff, we know you have decades of experience. Your work speaks for itself, and your approach to photography is as great as it gets. It's real. It is what it is. And it has tons of experience backing it. So we always love to have the most talented people in the industry, and SanDisk always does a great job in bringing them to us. So I want to thank SanDisk, Cliff, and all of our viewers out there, because you know what? We can't do it without you guys. We can't see you, but we know you're there. So
Derek, thank you very much. And Pete, thank you.
Thanks,
thank
Cliff.
you guys.
Thanks, B&H. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Hope that worked well. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was awesome. There, you guys have it all there. And again, if you guys are missing any of these or you jumped in this halfway through, this is always available to watch with all of our other live content on YouTube. If you just look up B&H Event Space, or if you head over to vimeo.com/BH Event Space on there. Huge thank you again to Cliff and the entire SanDisk team. That's it. Another round of the B&H Virtual Event Space is in the books. Catch y'all next time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.